Imagine for a second that you are beating a disease. Like it's the moment you've been praying for.
Right.
Your family is popping champagne, your doctor is thrilled, maybe even, shedding a tear of joy. It is this profound, unequivocally beautiful human victory.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge moment.
But while you are celebrating that cleared scan or that final treatment, the financial market is sitting in a boardroom, looking at a spreadsheet and asking a much colder question.
Which is, what happens to our future earnings when this customer no longer needs our product?
Wow.
It is a chilling question to hear out loud, but I mean, it is the fundamental question driving the invisible economic incentives of the American healthcare system.
It really is.
The source material we are looking at today argues that the architecture of modern medicine is built around a very specific mathematical reality.
Welcome to this deep dive.
Mm.
Today, we're taking a hard look at a set of sources collectively centered on the financialization of chronic illness. Our mission for you is to pull back the curtain on those invisible economic incentives. We're going to explore how the financial architecture of the medical system fundamentally prioritizes managing your chronic diseases over actually curing them.
Right.
So, if you've ever felt entirely exhausted by the endless loop of medical administration, or if you've ever just looked around and wondered why being healthy feels so incredibly difficult, well, these sources offer a completely new lens on how this system is built.
And to understand the machinery of this system, we really have to look closely at the central conflict between medicine and money.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
So, a cured patient is the ultimate goal of a physician, right? But it is a structural disaster for a business model built on recurring revenue.
That makes sense.
The text we are analyzing makes a crucial point right up front. We aren't talking about a cinematic conspiracy.
Right, like there's no evil layer.
Exactly. The tragedy here isn't that there's a group of cartoonish villains in a secret underground lab actively hiding cures from the public.
Which is almost too comforting of an idea. you know?
It is. It implies that if we just caught the bad guys, the problem would be solved. The darker, much more ordinary truth is that no villains are required. The financial incentives already know exactly what to do.
It's essentially the classic mechanic dilemma. Like,
Mhm.
if a mechanic is financially incentivized to only patch your tire so it slowly leaks again by next month rather than just selling you a brand new tire, they don't have to be an evil person.
No, they just have a mortgage to pay.
Right? Patching that tire over 30 days pays the mortgage better than fixing it once. But applying that logic to human biology changes the stakes entirely.
It really does. And the mechanics of how this plays out in corporate research and development are fascinating. The source text points out a stark mathematical reality. A disease that can be eliminated in 40 days is economically vastly inferior to a disease that can be managed for 40 years.
Wow, but that way it's grim.
It is. When a massive biotech firm is looking at where to allocate, $1 billion in research funding, they use a metric called net present value, or NPV.
Right, standard finance stuff.
Exactly. So if they have two molecules in early trials, one that permanently cures hepatitis C in 8 weeks, and another that manages an autoimmune condition with a monthly injection for the rest of a patient's life, the finance department runs the NPV calculation on both.
And the lifetime management molecule is going to win that calculation every single time because of the discount rate on future cash flows.
Every single time. The company isn't legally obligated to cure the world. They are legally obligated to maximize shareholder return.
The fiduciary duty.
Fiduciary duty mandates it. When you have a financialized healthcare economy, it is an economy of continuity. The hospital, the pharmaceutical company, the insurers, they don't prefer the dying patient because that patient eventually exits the market.
Right?
But they also don't prefer the fully cured patient
Mm.
because that patient also exits the market. The better a cure works, the faster it destroys its own total addressable market.
Which brings us to a really unsettling concept from the text. If the cured patient exits the market, the system has to be designed for someone else.
The managed patient.
Yes. The sources call this the managed patient. The ideal patient, like the perfect customer, is someone stable enough to go to work, frightened enough to comply with their doctor's orders, insured enough to actually be billed, and chronically dependent enough to have to return to the pharmacy every single month.
Illnesses like diabetes, hypertension, autoimmune diseases, chronic anxiety in a financialized system, these are no longer just viewed as painful human conditions. They are categorized and traded as asset classes.
Asset classes, that is wild.
Yeah, they are durable markets. Wall Street assigns valuations based on multiples of recurring revenue. So A company that creates a daily biologic injection has predictable cash flow for decades.
And Wall Street loves predictability.
Right, which Wall Street rewards with a massive valuation.
It's biology as a service. I mean, we've seen this take over the tech world entirely, right? Software companies stopped selling you a CD-ROM for 50 bucks and started charging you 15 bucks a month for the rest of your life. Software as a service.
It's exactly the same model.
But seeing it applied to human health is jarring. Pharmaceutical companies aren't just selling pills anymore. They're selling a financial relationship that can be monetized indefinitely. It runs on habit, insurance reimbursements, and clinical guidelines.
And that leads to a structural problem. If an entire multi-trillion-dollar industry relies on a steady stream of chronic patients to stay afloat, they need a pipeline. They need a constant supply of people entering the system.
Right. If they're relying on lifelong management, they must be terrified of running out of sick people. So, how is the pipeline staying so full?
Well, this is where the source material zooms out to the broader social environment. The text argues that our modern environment is effectively manufacturing the sickness.
Manufacturing it.
Yeah, the healthcare system isn't creating the illness, it's just monetizing the biological fallout of how we live.
The physiological breakdown. The sources are incredibly specific about the mechanisms here. Like, it's not just, oh, stress is bad.
No, it's much more structural.
Right. It's about how a 60-hour work week keeps the nervous system in a perpetual state of fight or flight, flooding the body with cortisol.
Exactly.
Over time, that chronic cortisol elevation drives insulin resistance, which leads to metabolic syndrome. Add in a food system that relies on ultra-processed, high-sugar staples, what the text calls cheap metabolic sabotage, and you are fundamentally altering the biological baseline of the population.
You combine that metabolic disruption with the permanent anxiety produced by housing markets where ownership is out of reach, right? Plus a debt structure that keeps adulthood under financial siege.
Oh, absolutely.
And a screen economy that intentionally colonizes our sleep and attention. The human body wasn't evolved to withstand this constant low-grade systemic pressure.
It just can't handle it.
It breaks down. It develops chronic inflammation, anxiety disorders, and autoimmune responses.
It reminds me of that analogy from the text about the poisoned river. Imagine a town where the local river is heavily contaminated by toxic runoff from a nearby factory.
Right.
People downstream are getting sick left and right. The American healthcare system doesn't march upstream to demand the factory stop polluting the water. There is no billable code for stopping the runoff.
No billable code at all.
Instead, it sets up a highly profitable, technologically advanced stand right on the riverbank to sell everyone a specialized $500 a month water filter.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. After the social environment manufactures the sickness, the medical system arrives to monetize the symptoms.
Yeah.
And from a financial perspective, the genius of this model is how it isolates the problem. The text uses this haunting phrase, the patient becomes the crime scene.
Wait, the patient becomes the crime scene.
Yes.
So by individualizing the sickness, they are treating a systemic failure as a personal malfunction. Like if I go to the doctor for chronic burnout and high blood pressure, the system frames it as my personal failure.
Exactly. You just need better sleep hygiene.
Right, or a mindfulness app or a new prescription. It completely absolves the 60-hour work week or the toxic environment from any responsibility.
The broader machine remains completely innocent. Your high blood pressure is treated strictly as a malfunction inside your own isolated body.
Wow.
But it is important to address a very common misconception here. When we talk about this financial architecture, the immediate reaction is to assume this is just big pharma pulling all the strings and dictating our health.
Right. The idea that there's one massive corporate overlord controlling the entire American health sector. But the source text actually pushes back on that narrative pretty hard, doesn't it?
It does. It argues that the system is so deeply fragmented that no single institution even can pull all the strings.
The fragmentation is the shield.
Precisely. It creates an endless circle of finger-pointing where no one has to take moral responsibility for the outcome. Let's look at the actual mechanism of how a drug gets priced and sold. A pharmaceutical company develops a new chronic medication and sets the list price at $10,000 a month. They claim they have to set it that high to recoup research costs. Then, a pharmacy benefit manager, a PBM, the middlemen who negotiate for insurers, comes in and demands a 40% rebate just to put that drug on the approved formulary.
So the PBM takes a massive cut. but the list price stays artificially high.
Right. Then the insurance company points to that $10,000 list price to justify raising premiums on the employer.
Unbelievable.
The employer sees their healthcare costs skyrocketing, so they switch their employees to high-deductible health plans to save money. And finally, the politician looks at the whole mess and gives a speech blaming the patient for not exercising enough.
Meanwhile, the actual consequence of that fragmented blame game lands in one very specific place: the pharmacy counter.
Exactly.
The sources ground all this high-level financial theory in the reality of the patient standing at that counter. Someone who, because of that high-deductible plan, is suddenly asked to pay $800 out of pocket for a drug they need to function. They are standing there, doing the math in their head, deciding which essential medication they can delay until the next paycheck clears so they can still afford groceries.
That is the daily reality of subscription medicine for people who cannot afford the lifelong maintenance. The system is incredibly lucrative for the shareholders, but it is financially devastating for the actual human being caught in the middle.
It's tragic.
And to maintain this reality, the text points out that the industry has had to fundamentally change the way we even talk about health.
The vocabulary shift.
Yes. When you transition from a model of healing to a model of commerce, the language has to follow suit. The moral vocabulary of medicine is being entirely replaced.
I mean, think about the last time you logged into a medical app. You aren't a patient seeking healing. You are a consumer logging into a patient portal.
Right.
Doctors are referred to as providers. The clinical interaction is called care delivery, as if they are, dropping off a pizza.
It's so true. When a society starts calling sick people consumers, it reveals exactly what it thinks illness is for. The body is no longer treated as a sacred organism in need of deep restoration. It is viewed as a portfolio of billable vulnerabilities.
A portfolio of billable vulnerabilities. Man.
The source material frames this as a profound ethical conflict between corporate valuation and patient well-being. But it also introduces a major caveat, which it calls the American paradox.
Because we have to acknowledge that American medicine is also responsible for undeniable miracles, right? Like we literally transplant hearts from one human to another.
Absolutely.
We can map the molecular architecture of rare diseases and develop targeted mRNA therapies. If you were in a horrific car crash, there is no place on earth you'd rather be than an American trauma center.
The American paradox is that we have absolute breathtaking genius at the point of intervention, but total dysfunction at the level of structure. We perform these scientific miracles after the body breaks, but we completely fail at the basic civilizational task of building a society where fewer bodies break in the first place.
Because prevention has no return on investment for a corporation.
Zero.
If a city invests in walkable spaces, ensures access to fresh food, and fosters a culture with adequate sleep, it might save billions of dollars and countless lives over a decade. But an avoided heart attack doesn't show up on a hospital's quarterly revenue report.
Public health creates value by removing the need for future transactions. Corporate healthcare creates value by capturing those transactions.
So true.
A profit-maximizing system naturally drifts toward management because the system itself has no soul. It doesn't hate the patient, but it cannot love the patient. It can only price the patient.
Wow.
The spreadsheets dictate the reality. Projected revenue, patent lifespans, and market size estimates are the true diagnostic tools of the industry.
It can only price the patient. I mean, if the architecture of the system is functioning exactly as it was financially designed to managing illness rather than curing it, relying on a social environment that manufactures sickness, and shielding itself through fragmented blame, how do we even begin to reimagine this?
It's a huge question.
The sources suggest we need a massive shift in how we incentivize healing.
The text leaves us with a direct challenge. It argues that the real question isn't whether we have the science to cure more diseases, we often do.
Yeah.
The real question is whether we have the moral and economic imagination to build a totally different architecture. We need to create a structure where cures are rewarded just as highly as lifelong consumption.
The ultimate success of healthcare shouldn't be acquiring a lifetime subscriber. The ultimate success should be the complete disappearance of the customer.
Exactly.
The goal has to shift from keeping a paying account alive to returning a human being to total freedom.
Valuing the disappearance of the illness over the persistence of the demand, it requires dismantling the idea that human biology is an asset class.
Let's take a breath and recap the journey we've just been on, because that is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is a lot to take in.
We've unpacked how the financial architecture of modern medicine Using tools like net present value and recurring revenue multiples turns chronic illness into an asset class.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at how our broader social environment, from our work hours to our food supply, manufactures the sickness that the medical system then monetizes.
Right, and we walk through the blame game from the pharmaceutical company down to the pharmacy counter.
And we explored why true, permanent healing is an economic threat to subscription medicine.
Along with the American paradox, our
What?
unparalleled ability to perform medical miracles at the point of acute intervention, while structurally failing to prevent the illness in the first
This
place.
leaves you with a lot to think about regarding your own interactions with the healthcare
Yeah.
system. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we've just discussed about incentives. If the true disappearance of a customer is the highest success of medicine, what if we completely flipped the global patent system?
Oh, moving away from the monopoly model.
Exactly. Right now, a pharmaceutical company gets a 20-year patent to exclusively sell a drug, incentivizing them to sell as many pills as possible for as long as possible.
Right.
Imagine an economic model where a company doesn't get paid per pill month after month. Instead, imagine they only receive an ultimate multi-billion-dollar payout from a collective global fund after a disease is entirely eradicated from the population.
A bounty on the cure rather than a subscription to the symptom.
What would medical innovation look like if the greatest financial reward on earth was tied strictly to never having to see the patient again?
That is a fascinating question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your week, we encourage you to look around at your own environment. Start questioning the filters you are being sold. And maybe ask yourself, why is the river poisoned in the first place? Until next time, keep diving deep.